The day Deanna Keller walked into the law office to sign away the next 10 years of her life. She wore the same black dress she had worn to her father's funeral 3 months earlier. She sat in the waiting room with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the gray carpet beneath her sensible flats. The lawyer had called her twice already, urging her to come in and finalize the arrangements. Her ex-boyfriend Marcus had left her with over $200,000 in debt, loans he had taken out in her name, credit cards he had maxed out with her signature, forged so skillfully that even she had trouble believing she had not signed them herself. The police said it would take years to prove fraud if they could prove it at all. The creditors did not care about her protests. They wanted their money, and her name was on every document. She had sold everything she owned. Her car, her furniture, the jewelry her mother had left her before dying when Deanna was 16. It was not enough, not even close. The lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses named Howard, had suggested bankruptcy. But that would destroy what little credit she had left and make it nearly impossible to rent an apartment or get any job that required a background check. She worked as a middle school art teacher, and she loved it, but the salary was barely enough to cover basic living expenses. With the debt payments looming, she would have to take on second and third jobs just to keep from drowning. She had one other option. Marcus's brother, a man she had never met, had reached out through Howard. He was willing to assume responsibility for the debt if Deanna agreed to certain terms. She did not know what those terms were yet, but Howard had assured her they were legal, if unconventional. Miss Keller. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, gestured toward the hallway. "Mr. Xavier will see you now." Deanna stood, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. She had expected to meet with Howard, not with Marcus's brother directly. Her heart hammered as she walked down the corridor, past framed degrees and landscape paintings that probably cost more than her annual salary. The receptionist opened a heavy oak door and Deanna stepped inside. The office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Behind a massive desk sat a man who looked nothing like Marcus. Where Marcus had been average height with a soft jawline and calculating eyes, this man was tall even while seated, with broad shoulders filling out an expensive charcoal suit. His dark hair was cut short, professional, and his jawline could have been carved from granite. When he looked up from the document he was reading, his eyes were a startling shade of blue, clear and direct. "Miss Keller," he said, standing. His voice was deep, measured. "I am Trevor Xavier. Please sit down." Deanna lowered herself into one of the leather chairs facing his desk, clutching her purse in her lap like a shield. "I thought I was meeting with Howard." "Howard works for me." Trevor returned to his seat, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. She forced herself to meet his gaze. "I wanted to speak with you directly about my brother's debt." "It is not your responsibility," Deanna said quietly. "I appreciate the offer, but I cannot ask you to pay for what Marcus did." "You are not asking. I am offering." Trevor leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Marcus is my half-brother. We share a father, nothing else. I have not spoken to him in 5 years, and I have no intention of starting now. But I looked into what he did to you, and I have decided to handle it." Deanna felt her throat tighten. "Why would you do that?" "Because he used my family name to con you." Trevor's voice hardened. "You believed he came from money, that he had resources and connections. He used the Xavier name to gain your trust, and then he destroyed your financial life. That reflects on me whether I like it or not." "I should have been smarter," Deanna whispered, shame burning in her chest. "I should have seen what he was doing." "He is a professional liar," Trevor said flatly. "This is not your fault." Deanna looked down at her hands. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of her own stupidity pressed down on her shoulders every waking moment. She had ignored red flags, made excuses, believed promises that seemed too good to be true, because she had wanted so desperately for someone to love her. Her father's death had left her unmoored, and Marcus had appeared at exactly the right moment to offer stability and affection. She had been so grateful, so eager to trust, that she had not asked the right questions until it was far too late. "What are the terms?" she asked, forcing herself to look up at Trevor. He slid a folder across the desk. "I will pay off the entire debt immediately. In exchange, you will work for me for 6 months. Deanna blinked, confused. "Work for you? Doing what?" "I recently acquired a property upstate. A large estate that has been empty for years. I am converting it into a retreat center for artists and educators. I need someone to oversee the interior design, to make sure the space is functional and inspiring for the people who will use it. You are an art teacher. You understand what creative people need in a workspace." Deanna opened the folder, scanning the details. The salary he was offering for 6 months was more than she made in a year of teaching. "This is too much. It is fair compensation for the work required. You will live on the property during the project, all expenses covered. At the end of 6 months, the debt is settled and you are free to return to your life." It sounded too good to be true, and Diana had learned the hard way what happened when things sounded too good to be true. "Why me?" "You could hire a professional designer." "I could," Trevor agreed. "But I looked at your background. You put yourself through college working 3 jobs. You have been teaching for 5 years in an underfunded school district, and your students consistently win regional art competitions. You spent your own money buying supplies when the school budget ran out. You understand what it means to create something meaningful with limited resources. That is what I need." Deanna stared at the contract, her mind racing. 6 months. She could take a leave of absence from teaching. She could pay off the debt that had been choking the life out of her. And then she could start over, truly start over, without Marcus's shadow hanging over every decision. "Do not carry his debt," Trevor said, and something in his voice made her look up. His expression had softened slightly, though his eyes were still intense. "You do not deserve to spend the next decade drowning because of what he did." "I do not have a choice," Deanna said, her voice barely audible. "You do now." Trevor pushed a pen across the desk toward her. Deanna picked up the pen, her hand shaking slightly. She read through the contract 3 times, looking for the catch, the hidden clause that would trap her again. But it was straightforward. 6 months of work in exchange for full payment of Marcus's debt. There were clauses about confidentiality, about professional conduct, but nothing that seemed unreasonable or predatory. At the bottom of the final page was a number that made her breath catch. $247,000, the exact amount she owed, down to the cent. She signed her name, each letter feeling like a step toward freedom. Trevor witnessed the signature, then tucked the contract into his desk drawer. "When can you start?" he asked. "I need to give notice at school. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Trevor nodded. "I will have Howard send you the details about the property. There is a cottage on the grounds where you will stay. It is fully furnished." Deanna stood, feeling dizzy with relief and residual fear. "Thank you. I do not know how to repay you. Do good work," Trevor said simply. "That is enough." Deanna left the office in a daze, taking the elevator down to the lobby and stepping out into the bright afternoon sunlight. She felt like she could breathe for the first time in months, like the invisible weight crushing her chest had finally lifted. She did not know Trevor Xavier, did not understand why a millionaire would go out of his way to help a stranger, but she was not going to waste this chance. She would work harder than she had ever worked in her life. She would prove that his faith in her was not misplaced. 3 weeks later, Deanna drove upstate in her newly purchased used sedan, following the directions Howard had emailed her. The roads grew narrower and more winding as she left the city behind, trees pressing in on either side until she felt like she was entering another world entirely. The GPS directed her down a long private drive lined with old oaks, their branches forming a canopy overhead. The estate appeared like something from a dream. The main house was a sprawling stone structure with ivy climbing the walls, elegant but slightly wild. Beyond it, she could see other buildings, what looked like converted stables and a greenhouse with half its glass panels missing. To the right, nestled among a grove of birch trees, stood a small cottage with blue shutters and a front porch. Trevor's truck was parked near the main house. Deanna had not expected him to be here, had assumed he would have staff handling the day-to-day operations. But when she parked and got out, he emerged from the front door in jeans and a work shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked different without the suit, more approachable but no less commanding. "You found it," he said, walking over to her. "Any trouble with the directions?" "No, they were perfect." Deanna looked around, taking in the scope of the property. "This place is incredible." "It was my grandfather's," Trevor said, following her gaze. "He was a painter, mostly landscapes. He bought this land in the 50s and built the house himself. After he died, it sat empty. My father had no use for it." There was something in his tone, a darkness that suggested complicated family dynamics. Deanna did not pry. "You grew up here, Summers," Trevor said. "My grandfather taught me to appreciate what artists do, even if I did not inherit any talent myself. He would have loved the idea of turning this into a place where people could come and create." Deanna smiled, the first genuine smile she had felt in months. "It is a beautiful legacy." Trevor showed her around the property, pointing out the buildings they would need to renovate. The main house needed new plumbing and electrical work before they could even think about interior design. The stables were structurally sound but needed to be converted into studio spaces. The greenhouse required complete restoration. It was an enormous amount of work, and Deanna felt a flutter of anxiety about whether she was qualified to oversee it all. "I have contractors coming Monday to start on the main house," Trevor said as they walked back toward the cottage. "Your job is to make sure they understand the vision. I will handle the business side." "Will you be here?" Deanna asked, then immediately regretted the question. It sounded too eager, too dependent, but Trevor just nodded. "For the first few weeks, at least. I am staying in one of the completed rooms in the house. Once the project is rolling, I will split my time between here and the city." He helped her carry her bags into the cottage, which was exactly as promised. Small but beautifully furnished, with a kitchen that had everything she could need and a bedroom with windows overlooking the birch grove. There was even a studio space set up with an easel and art supplies. "I thought you might want to keep working on your own projects," Trevor said, noticing her examining the easel. "Howard mentioned you paint." Deanna felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Gratitude, yes, but also something warmer. No one had encouraged her art in years. Teaching took all her time and energy, and Marcus had dismissed her painting as a hobby, something she should have outgrown. "Thank you. This is more than I expected." Trevor shrugged, looking slightly uncomfortable with her thanks. "Dinner is at 7. Come up to the main house. We can go over the plans." He left before she could respond, his long strides carrying him quickly across the grass. Deanna watched him go, then turned back to her cottage. She spent the afternoon unpacking, arranging her few belongings in the drawers and closet. Everything she owned fit into 2 suitcases and a box of art supplies. Marcus had taken so much from her, not just money but the life she had built, and now she was starting over in a strange place with a man she barely knew. But as she looked around the cozy cottage, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. That evening, Deanna walked up to the main house, following the sound of music to the kitchen. Trevor was cooking, which surprised her. She had expected catered meals or takeout, not a millionaire standing at a stove stirring something that smelled incredible. "I did not know you cooked," she said from the doorway. Trevor glanced over his shoulder. "My grandfather's other lesson. He said a man who could not feed himself was not really independent." He gestured to the table, which was already set for two. "Sit. This is almost ready." Deanna sat, watching as Trevor plated pasta with homemade sauce and grilled vegetables. He moved with confidence in the kitchen, the same way he moved everywhere else, like a man who was comfortable in his own skin and did not need to prove anything to anyone. "Tell me about your teaching," he said once they were both eating. "What do you love about it?" Diana paused, surprised by the question. Marcus had never asked about her work, had treated it like something she did to fill time until something better came along. "I love watching kids discover they can create something that matters. A lot of my students come from difficult backgrounds. Art gives them a way to express things they cannot say out loud." Trevor listened intently, asking questions about her methods, about what supplies she wished she had, about the students who had impacted her most. Deanna found herself talking more than she had in months, the words spilling out as Trevor nodded and occasionally smiled at her stories. "You are good at what you do," he said finally. "That is clear." Deanna felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I try. You succeed." Trevor stood to clear the plates. "Tomorrow we will walk through the main house and you can start thinking about the design. I want each space to serve a different purpose. Painting studios, sculpture workshops, quiet rooms for writing or meditation. Whatever you think artists would need." They spent the next hour poring over blueprints and photographs of the buildings, Trevor explaining his vision while Deanna took notes and sketched rough ideas. He wanted the space to be both inspiring and functional, beautiful but not precious. A place where people could make messes and take risks without worrying about damaging something expensive. "My grandfather used to say that art was not about being careful," Trevor said, tracing a finger along the blueprint of the main house. "It was about being brave enough to make mistakes in public." Diana looked up at him, seeing something vulnerable in his expression. "You miss him." "Every day." Trevor met her eyes, and for a moment the air between them felt charged with something Diana could not name. "He was the only person in my family who gave a damn about anything real." Before Deanna could respond, Trevor straightened, the moment breaking. "You should get some rest. Monday will be chaotic with the contractors arriving." Deanna walked back to her cottage under a sky full of stars, her mind spinning with ideas and something else, something that felt dangerous to acknowledge. Trevor Xavier was handsome, yes, but it was more than that. He was thoughtful and passionate, and he listened when she talked. But he was also her employer, and she was here because his brother had destroyed her life. Getting involved with another Xavier, even one who seemed fundamentally different from Marcus, would be the height of stupidity. She would keep things professional. She would do her job, pay off her debt, and leave at the end of 6 months with her life back on track. That was the plan, and Diana was determined to stick to it. Monday arrived with a convoy of trucks and a crew of contractors who descended on the property like a purposeful storm. Trevor was everywhere at once, directing the work, solving problems, carrying materials when extra hands were needed. Deanna watched him haul beams and wrestle with plumbing fixtures alongside the workers, his dress shirts replaced with worn T-shirts that showed off the muscles in his arms and back. He was not a millionaire who sat in an office and gave orders. He worked, really worked, and the crew respected him for it. Diana focused on her own tasks, meeting with the head contractor to discuss how to preserve the historical character of the buildings while updating them for modern use. She spent hours measuring rooms and sketching layouts, thinking about natural light and flow, about how to create spaces that would nurture creativity rather than stifle it. Lunch was a casual affair, everyone gathering in the shade of the old oaks to eat sandwiches and drink cold water. Trevor sat next to Diana on the grass, his shoulder brushing hers as he reached for his water bottle. "What do you think?" he asked, gesturing to the main house, where workers were tearing out walls that had rotted over the decades. "I think your grandfather would love what you are doing," Diana said honestly. Trevor smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. "I hope so." Over the following weeks, Diana fell into a rhythm. Her days were spent planning and overseeing the interior work, selecting paint colors and fixtures, arranging for furniture and equipment to be delivered. Her evenings were spent with Trevor, either reviewing progress over dinner or simply sitting on the cottage porch talking about everything and nothing. He told her about building his business, about the risks he had taken and the failures he had survived. She told him about her parents, about losing them both too young and feeling like she was constantly searching for a place to belong. They did not talk about Marcus. That subject remained off limits, a dark space they both avoided. But sometimes, Diana caught Trevor watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something protective and fierce that made her heart race. One evening in late September, nearly 2 months into the project, Diana was working in what would become the main painting studio. The walls were finished, a warm cream that would reflect natural light without overwhelming paintings in progress. She was testing different arrangements of easels when Trevor appeared in the doorway. "It is looking good," he said, walking into the space. "Really good." Diana turned to face him, suddenly aware of how close he was standing. "Thank you. I think artists are going to love working in here." "Diana," Trevor said, and something in his tone made her pulse quicken. "Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever paint anymore? For yourself, I mean, not just for teaching demonstrations." Diana looked away, uncomfortable with the question. "Not really. I have not had much time, or much inspiration." Trevor moved closer, his voice gentle. "Marcus took that from you too." Diana felt her throat tighten. "How did you know?" "Because I know my brother. He destroys things. It is what he does." Trevor reached out, his fingers brushing her arm in a gesture so tender that Diana felt tears prick her eyes. "But you are not destroyed. You are still here, still creating, still fighting." "I am tired of fighting," Diana whispered. "Then rest." Trevor's hand moved to her face, cupping her cheek with a gentleness that made her breath catch. "You are safe here." Diana knew she should step back, should remind them both that this was a professional relationship, that getting involved would complicate everything. But she was so tired of being careful, of protecting herself from possibilities, because of what Marcus had done. Trevor was nothing like his brother. Every day proved that more clearly. She leaned into his touch, letting herself feel the warmth of his palm against her skin. "Trevor, I do not know if this is a good idea." "I know it is not," Trevor said, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. "But I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the day you walked into my office. You were terrified and ashamed and still so damn brave, signing that contract even though you thought it might be another trap. I have never met anyone like you." "You barely know me," Diana protested, even as her heart soared at his words. "I know you work until you are exhausted and then get up the next morning and work harder. I know you cry when you talk about your students. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar and you hum when you are concentrating. I know you deserve someone who sees how extraordinary you are." Trevor's other hand came up to frame her face, his blue eyes intense. "I see you, Deanna." Deanna felt something inside her crack open, all the walls she had built around her heart crumbling under the weight of his words. "I see you too," she said softly. "And I am terrified." "Me too," Trevor admitted. "But I am more terrified of letting you walk away at the end of 6 months without telling you how I feel." Diana reached up, covering his hands with hers. "What if this does not work? What if I am making another mistake? Then we will figure it out together." Trevor leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "But Deanna, this is not a mistake. I promise you, this is not a mistake." When he kissed her, it was nothing like kissing Marcus had been. Marcus's kisses had been demanding, taking what he wanted without concern for what she needed. Trevor kissed her like she was something precious, his lips soft and questioning against hers, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Deanna did not want to pull away. She wanted to sink into this feeling, into the safety and desire and hope that flooded through her. She kissed him back, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him under her palms. Trevor made a low sound in his throat, pulling her closer, and Deanna felt like she was finally home. They broke apart slowly, both breathing hard. Trevor rested his forehead against hers again, his hands still cradling her face like she might disappear if he let go. "Stay tonight," he said quietly. "Not in the cottage, with me." Deanna knew what he was asking, and she knew what it meant. This was not just attraction or convenience. This was a beginning, a choice to trust again despite everything Marcus had done to shatter her ability to trust. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." They walked hand in hand back to the main house, to the room Trevor had claimed on the second floor. It was simple, just a bed and a dresser and windows overlooking the gardens, but Deanna did not care about the surroundings. She only cared about Trevor, about the way he touched her like she was made of glass and steel, fragile and unbreakable at the same time. They made love slowly, tenderly, Trevor whispering her name like a prayer as Deanna learned the shape of his body, the sounds he made when she touched him just right. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Trevor's fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I am falling in love with you," he said into the quiet. "I know it is fast, and I know you might need more time, but I needed you to know." Deanna turned in his arms, looking up at his face in the moonlight streaming through the window. "I am falling in love with you too," she admitted. "And it scares me more than anything I have ever felt." "We will take it slow," Trevor promised. "Whatever you need." But slow proved impossible. Over the next weeks they fell deeper into each other, stealing moments between meetings with contractors and deliveries of furniture. Trevor would pull Deanna into empty rooms and kiss her until she forgot what she was supposed to be doing. Deanna would find excuses to seek Trevor out, needing to see his smile, to hear his laugh, to feel grounded by his presence. The property transformed around them. The main house regained its grandeur. The stables became light-filled studios, and the greenhouse emerged from its ruins as a crystal palace full of plants and possibilities. Deanna poured her heart into every design choice, wanting to create something that honored Trevor's grandfather and the vision Trevor had for helping other artists. In early November, with the project nearly complete, Deanna was in the greenhouse arranging the final plantings when Trevor found her. He looked serious, almost worried, and Diana's stomach clenched with sudden fear. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately. Trevor pulled an envelope from his pocket. "This came today. It is from Marcus." Deanna felt ice flood her veins. "What does he want?" he heard. "I paid off his debts." "He wants money to keep quiet about our relationship, threatening to claim I manipulated you, use the debt as leverage to coerce you into something inappropriate." Trevor's jaw was tight with anger. It is blackmail, and it is complete nonsense, but he is betting that the threat of scandal will make me pay. Deanna took the letter with shaking hands, scanning the words. Marcus's writing was just as she remembered, smooth and persuasive even in threat. He claimed Diana had been vulnerable and Trevor had taken advantage, that their relationship was transactional and unethical. He wanted $500,000 to make the accusations go away. "He is lying," Deanna said, her voice shaking. "Everything in this letter is a lie. I know that. And you know that. But mud sticks, Deanna. Even if we fought this and won, the accusation itself could damage both of us. Your reputation, your teaching career, my business. Marcus knows exactly what he is doing." Deanna felt rage bubble up inside her, rage she had been suppressing for months. "So he gets away with it again. He destroys my life, and now he gets to destroy this too?" "No." Trevor took the letter from her and tore it in half. "He does not get to touch this. He does not get to touch you ever again." "But the scandal, I do not care about scandal," Trevor said fiercely. "I care about you. We are going to the police. We are going to give them every piece of evidence I have collected about Marcus's fraud, every forged signature, every false statement. We are going to make sure he faces actual consequences this time. And then we are going to sue him for harassment and defamation until he has nothing left but regrets." Deanna stared at him, hope and fear warring in her chest. "That will take time, money, energy." "I have all three," Trevor said, pulling her into his arms. "And Deanna, you are worth every second, every dollar, every ounce of fight I have in me. I love you. I am not letting him ruin that." Deanna buried her face in Trevor's chest, breathing in his familiar scent. "I love you too. So much it terrifies me." "Good," Trevor said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Love should be a little terrifying. It means it matters." The next months were difficult. The legal battle with Marcus was exhausting, requiring statements and depositions and meetings with lawyers that dragged up every painful memory of Diana's relationship with him. But Trevor was beside her through all of it, holding her hand in waiting rooms, bringing her tea when she could not sleep, reminding her that Marcus only had power if they let him. The retreat center opened in March, 6 months after Deanna had signed that contract in Trevor's office. Artists and educators from around the region arrived for workshops and residencies, filling the spaces Deanna had designed with laughter and creativity and life. She watched them work, watched them thrive in the environment she had helped create, and felt something heal inside her. Marcus was arrested in April. The evidence Trevor had compiled was overwhelming, and prosecutors charged him with multiple counts of fraud and identity theft. He took a plea deal to avoid trial, sentenced to 5 years in prison with restitution owed to Deanna and several other victims who had come forward once they heard about the case. Diana did not go to the sentencing. She had said everything she needed to say in her victim impact statement, and she did not want to see Marcus's face ever again. Instead, she spent the day in the greenhouse with Trevor, planting herbs and vegetables for the retreat center's kitchen. "It is really over," she said, sitting back on her heels and looking at Trevor. "It is really over," Trevor confirmed. He was dirty from gardening, his hair sticking up where he had run his fingers through it, and Deanna thought he had never looked more handsome. "What happens now?" she asked. Trevor set down his trowel and turned to face her fully. "Now you decide what you want. Your 6 months are up. The contract is fulfilled. You are free to go back to teaching, to start over somewhere new, to do whatever will make you happy." Diana's heart clenched. "What do you want?" "I want you to stay," Trevor said simply. "I want you to stay here with me and keep designing spaces for artists. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to build a life with you, Deanna, the kind of life neither of us thought we could have. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a simple, perfect diamond ring. "I want to marry you if you will have me." Deanna felt tears spill down her cheeks as she looked at the ring, then at Trevor's face. He looked nervous, vulnerable in a way she had never seen before, and she loved him even more for it. "Yes," she said, launching herself into his arms. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you so much." Trevor caught her, holding her tight and spinning her around in the greenhouse, while Deanna laughed and cried at the same time. He set her down gently and slid the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with all the love and passion and promise of their future together. They were married in June in the gardens of the estate, surrounded by friends and colleagues and students from Deanna's school who could not believe their shy art teacher had found such happiness. Deanna wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers from the property. Trevor wore a suit but lost the tie halfway through the reception, and they danced under string lights until the stars came out. Diana did not go back to teaching full-time. Instead, she split her role between managing the retreat center and running art programs for local schools, bringing students to the estate for workshops and mentorship with visiting artists. Trevor expanded his business interests, but made sure to spend more time at the estate than in the city, unable to stay away from Diana for more than a few days at a stretch. They talked about having children, and a year after the wedding, Diana discovered she was pregnant. Trevor was ecstatic, already planning a nursery and reading parenting books with the same intensity he brought to everything else. Deanna watched him become more protective and tender as her belly grew, his hands constantly seeking the movement of their baby, his voice soft when he talked to the child they had not yet met. Their daughter was born on a snowy January morning, perfect and healthy and loud. They named her Grace, for the grace that had brought them together despite everything that should have kept them apart. Trevor held her with tears streaming down his face, and Diana knew she had finally found what she had been searching for all her life. A family, a home, a love that was real and lasting and strong enough to weather anything. Marcus's debts became a distant memory, something that had happened to a different Diana in a different lifetime. This Diana was happy, secure, loved beyond measure. She painted again, her canvases full of light and color, and she taught other artists to find their own voices in the spaces she and Trevor had created. On Grace's first birthday, they gathered in the main house with friends and family, the rooms filled with laughter and joy. Deanna stood at the window watching Trevor play with their daughter, listening to her delighted squeals as he lifted her high in the air. She thought about the woman she had been 2 years earlier, broken and ashamed and drowning in debt that was not her fault. She thought about Trevor's words in his office that first day. "Do not carry his debt. You have a choice now." She had made the right choice. She had chosen to trust again, to love again, to believe that not all men were like Marcus. And in return, she had received more than she ever could have imagined. Trevor looked up and caught her watching, his face breaking into the smile he reserved only for her and Grace. He mouthed "I love you" across the room, and Deanna mouthed it back, her heart full to overflowing. The debt was paid. The past was behind them, and the future stretched out bright and beautiful and theirs. Deanna thought about the young art teacher who had walked into Trevor's office in a funeral dress, desperate and terrified. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that everything would be okay. Better than okay. She wished she could tell her that the man offering help was not another Marcus, not another person who would use and discard her. He was Trevor, her Trevor. The love of her life, the father of her child, the person who had seen her at her lowest and loved her anyway. But that Deanna could not have heard it. She had needed to take the leap herself, to choose trust despite her fear, to believe that she deserved good things even when everything in her life had taught her otherwise. Years passed in a blur of happiness. Grace grew into a curious, creative child who loved the estate as much as her parents did. She learned to paint from Diana and to build things from Trevor, her little hands always covered in some combination of paint and dirt. When she was 3, Diana became pregnant again, and they welcomed twin boys into their family, rounding out their household with chaos and joy. The retreat center thrived, becoming known nationally as a place where artists could find both inspiration and practical support. Diana expanded the programs, adding residencies for teachers who needed to reignite their own creativity, for veterans using art as therapy, for teenagers who needed a safe space to explore who they were becoming. Trevor supported every expansion, finding funding and resources, using his business connections to make sure the center never wanted for anything. They celebrated their 5th anniversary by renewing their vows in the same gardens where they had married, Grace and the twins standing beside them, as Diana and Trevor promised again to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives. This time there were no tears, just laughter and joy and the bone-deep certainty that they had found something most people only dreamed of. Marcus served his time and was released, but he never contacted them again. Diana heard through Howard that he had moved across the country, and she felt nothing but pity for him. He had thrown away the chance for real connection in favor of short-term gains, and now he was alone while she had everything that mattered. On Grace's 10th birthday, Diana organized a special exhibition at the retreat center, showcasing work by former students and residents. The main house was transformed into a gallery, every wall covered with paintings and photographs and sculptures that represented years of creativity and growth. Trevor stood beside Diana at the opening, his arm around her waist as they watched people admire the art. "Your grandfather would be so proud," Diana said softly. "I think he would be more proud of you," Trevor replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You made this place what it is. You gave it a soul." Diana leaned into him, watching Grace explain one of her own paintings to a visitor with the confidence of a child who had grown up surrounded by art and encouragement. The twins were racing through the garden outside, their laughter floating through the open windows. This was her life now, this abundance of love and creativity and purpose. She thought about debt, about the different kinds of debts people carried. Marcus had left her with financial debt, yes, but also emotional debt, the weight of betrayal and shame that had nearly crushed her. Trevor had paid the financial debt, but Diana had done the hard work of paying the emotional one, of forgiving herself for being human, for trusting the wrong person, for not being perfect, and in the process, she had discovered something she had not expected. She was strong. Stronger than she had ever known. Strong enough to start over, to love again, to build a life that honored who she really was rather than who she thought she needed to be. "Thank you," Diana said, turning to look up at Trevor. "For what?" he asked, confused. "For seeing me when I could not see myself. For giving me a choice when I thought I had none. For loving me even when I was terrified to be loved." Trevor cupped her face in his hands, his blue eyes soft. "Diana, loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done. You make everything in my life better just by being in it." They kissed there in the gallery, surrounded by art and people and the life they had built together. It was not a fairy tale. There were still hard days, moments of stress and worry and doubt. But they faced everything together, partners in every sense of the word, and that made all the difference. As the years continued to unfold, Diana never forgot where she had started. She made a point of mentoring young women who were struggling, offering them opportunities and support without judgment. She knew what it felt like to be drowning, and she wanted to be the lifeline for others that Trevor had been for her. The retreat center became her legacy, a place where broken people could come and find themselves again through art and community. Trevor joked that he had created a monster, watching Diana pour more and more of herself into expanding the programs and reaching more people. But he was proud, so proud, of the woman she had become. Their children grew up understanding that art was not a luxury but a necessity, that creativity was how humans made sense of the world and connected with each other. Grace went to college to study art education, following in Diana's footsteps. The twins were still young, but they showed signs of their own creative talents, one drawn to music and the other to writing. On their 20th anniversary, Trevor surprised Diana with a renovated studio space attached to the cottage where she had first stayed. It was light-filled and perfect, with everything she could possibly need to work on her own art. He had commissioned a sign for the door that read, "Diana Xavier Artist," and when she saw it, she cried. "You are not just a teacher or a director or my wife or their mother," Trevor said, holding her close. "You are an artist. You always have been, and I wanted you to have a space that honored that." Diana spent her afternoons in that studio, painting canvases that captured the beauty of the estate and the life they had built there. She had exhibitions in local galleries, and while she never became famous, she did not need to be. She was creating for herself, expressing the joy and gratitude that filled her heart, and that was enough. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Grace home from college for the weekend, and the twins playing in the yard, Trevor took Diana's hand. "You remember the day we met?" He asked. "Every detail," Diana said. "I was so scared, I thought my life was over. And look at us now." Trevor squeezed her hand. "I knew the moment I saw you that you were going to change everything for me. I had spent years building a business, accumulating wealth, but I had no idea what I was working toward. And then you walked in and suddenly I knew. I was building toward this, toward you, toward the life we could have together." Diana felt tears prick her eyes, even after all these years, still moved by his words. "I thought I was signing a contract for 6 months of work. I did not know I was signing up for the rest of my life." "Best contract you ever signed?" Trevor asked with a smile. "Best contract I ever signed," Diana confirmed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn pink and orange and purple. The estate was peaceful in the evening light, the buildings they had restored standing solid and beautiful. Diana thought about all the people who had passed through this place, all the lives that had been touched and changed by what she and Trevor had created together. She thought about debt and choice, and the strange way life could transform in an instant when someone offered help without strings attached. Trevor could have ignored Marcus's crimes. He could have decided it was not his problem. But he had chosen to care, to intervene, to offer Diana a path forward when she had been unable to see one, and she had chosen to take it. Despite her fear, despite her shame, despite every reason to believe she was walking into another trap, she had signed that contract and trusted that maybe, just maybe, this time things would be different. They had been different. Better than different. They had been everything Diana had never dared to dream of, and more. Grace called out from the yard, asking if they could roast marshmallows, and Trevor stood to help the twins gather wood for the fire pit. Diana watched her family move around the estate with the easy comfort of people who knew they belonged, who knew they were loved unconditionally. This was what freedom looked like, she realized. Not the absence of debt, though that helped. Not financial security, though that helped too. Real freedom was knowing you were valued for who you were, not what you could provide. It was being surrounded by people who celebrated your successes and supported you through failures. It was waking up every morning next to someone who chose you again and again, as enthusiastically as they had chosen you the first time. Diana joined her family at the fire pit, settling into the chair Trevor had saved for her and accepting the marshmallow Grace handed her. The twins were arguing about the best marshmallow roasting technique, while Trevor mediated with exaggerated seriousness. Diana laughed, the sound mixing with the crackle of the fire and the evening bird song. She had come to this place broken, carrying a debt that was not hers but had become her burden anyway. Trevor had said she did not have to carry it. He had said she had a choice now, and Diana had chosen this. Love, family, art, purpose. A life built on honesty and partnership, and the radical idea that sometimes people helped each other simply because they could, because it was right, because everyone deserved a second chance. The stars came out one by one, and Diana sat with her family under the vast sky, her heart full of gratitude for the path that had led her here. The debt was long paid. The contract had expired years ago. But the life they had built together would last forever, a testament to the power of choosing trust over fear, love over bitterness, hope over despair. Trevor reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. No words were needed. They had said everything that mattered in the thousands of moments that made up their days, in the looks they shared across crowded rooms, in the way they moved around each other with unconscious grace. Diana squeezed his hand back, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady presence that had anchored her through every storm. She looked at Grace, so much like Diana in her creativity and passion, and at the twins, who had Trevor's confidence and her sensitive heart. This was her legacy. Not the art she created or the programs she ran, but the love she had built with Trevor, the family they had raised, the life they had chosen together. The night grew darker and the fire burned lower, but no one wanted to go inside. They stayed together under the stars, the Xavier family in all its beautiful, imperfect, precious glory. And Diana knew, with absolute certainty, that she would never take a single moment of this for granted. She had been given a gift when Trevor walked into her life, and she had spent every day since trying to be worthy of it. She did not carry Marcus's debt anymore. She carried love instead and gratitude, and joy so profound it sometimes took her breath away. She carried the knowledge that she had been brave enough to trust again, smart enough to recognize the difference between manipulation and genuine care, strong enough to build a new life from the ashes of the old. And as Trevor pulled her close and pressed a kiss to her forehead, as Grace and the twins laughed at some shared joke, as the fire crackled and the stars wheeled overhead, Diana knew she was exactly where she was meant to be, home, loved, free. The debt was paid, and the life she had received in return was worth more than all the money in the world.